Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Friday stream. Hope you guys had a great week and hope you're about to have a great weekend. I am happy to be here with you. Hello, Zay. Good to see you. Hello, everyone who's here. Thanks for showing up on time. This month is Black History Month. And I wanted to spend the rest of the streams this month talking about issues that deal specifically with Black women or specific concerns to Black women. Obviously, I'm not a Black woman, and I don't see the world from that perspective, but I want to highlight some of those issues and have this be just another space where those kinds of conversations can happen and we can get some more awareness going for some of these issues. So the article I have today it's pretty sad, but it's pretty eye-opening. I normally live react to the articles on stream, and I'm reading them along with you for the first time. But this article, actually, when it showed up in the paper, I read it start to finish, couldn't put it down because it is such a compelling story. And it's sad and tragic, but it's an important story. So hello, everyone. Useless, Julie, Taquito, Expired Milk, Jacana. Great to see all of you. So I have a few slides before we get into the article. So a little trigger warning. We're going to be talking about pregnancy complications, death, illness, and racism. Rule number 1 is take care of yourself. If any of these topics are triggering to you, then you know what to do. Again, first and foremost, take care of yourself. And also, disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, obviously. Nothing you're going to hear today should be construed as medical advice for you personally. If you have questions, ask your doctor. So before we get started, I want to just talk broadly and give some context to this story about pregnancy and childbirth complications and infant mortality statistics. Oh, you're welcome. Yes, again, and feel free if there are any specific issues that you ever want me to talk about. I see this space as sort of like a community for us all to learn and grow together. So feel free. It's like just as much your space as my space. And I already have 2 recommendations for streams for the rest of this month, or upcoming streams. One is going to be talking about Black femininity, which we've been talking a lot about femininity lately, so it goes along with that. And I found a really amazing essay written by a Black woman who is critical of Black femininity. And just super, super interesting to see that perspective. And then someone else suggested talking about domestic violence amongst Black women as the victims of domestic violence, because they experience it much more than white women do. So I am definitely interested in talking about both of those topics. And thank you all for being here. Like I'm doing the work, but the community exists because of you and your participation and everything. So I really, really appreciate that. And also, if you're a lurker out there, feel free to just say hi. Everyone in this community is so nice. And, even when we disagree on things, we're able to do it in like a totally, chill way for the most part. And yeah, I just appreciate all of you. Some of you know that I used to be a lurker in places, and how I found my voice was in feminist communities where other women were really encouraging of me. So if I can pay that forward and help somebody else find their voice, I would love to be able to do that. So yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about pregnancy complications that can lead to injury and death and things like that. Daughter of Yamoja says this issue is actually one of the reasons I don't want to have kids. Pregnancy has always been scary to me. I agree. I am an antinatalist, hot take. Um, but I think, women are going to have kids, right? So women are going to choose to have kids, and the world should be oriented in a way that when they do, it's as safe as possible for them. But, dying from pregnancy is avoidable if you don't get pregnant. So, hey, Ketracel. Hey, lots of friendly new faces and old faces here. It's great to see all of you. Okay. So I got all these statistics from the CDC website, cdc.gov. About 700 women per year die of pregnancy complications in the US, and the majority of those are preventable. So a lot of them are caused by lack of access to good healthcare. Not just lack of access to healthcare, but lack of access to quality healthcare and prenatal care and things like that. The fact that they're preventable just makes it even more tragic, because in the presence of quality healthcare, none of these deaths would be happening, or 2/3 of them wouldn't be happening. And nationwide, Black and American Indian Alaska Native women were about 3 times as likely to die from a pregnancy-related cause as white women. And there's not really a genetic component to this. This is due to systemic racism. And this is one example of, systemic racism. And one reason why intersectionality in feminism is so important, to look at the fact that, yes, all women are oppressed because we're female, but certain women experience extra layers of oppression. This is one. Um, So I'm just reading Lavender Rose's comment. I'm assuming you're suggesting this as, I'm just going to take a screenshot real quick, because um, I think that you're suggesting this as a topic. So that sounds really interesting. I have actually read about the topic of Black Marxism in the past. So, I mean, capitalism and how, feminism is anti-capitalist is like a super interesting topic to me too. And of course, capitalism doesn't exist without women's free labor. And because Black women are paid the least of all workers, it's really a whole system of exploitation, of which women and Black women are really exploited. I don't know. Not very articulate. I would definitely like to look into that topic, though. Thank you for bringing it up. Um, so 31% of maternal or pregnancy-related deaths happen during pregnancy. This was something that was super interesting to me to find out, that about a third occur during pregnancy, a third occur during delivery, and up to a week afterward, and a third occur up to a year after delivery. And so you're not out of the woods, even though you've given birth and maybe healed and recovered quite a bit from it. The risk of dying from a pregnancy related issue um, remains for up to a year. Yes, it is horrifying. I agree. That was pretty surprising in my little research I did on this. So, some causes of pregnancy-related death in the US, a lot of it's heart-related conditions, infection or a systemic infection like sepsis, uh, again, cardiomyopathy, another heart condition, heart cell death, hemorrhage, blood hemorrhage. So lots of things that can happen. Stroke, which you could consider that a cardiovascular um, issue as well, high blood pressure. And a lot of these things have symptoms and can be identified in advance if proper medical care is available. And it's not just like an emergency that happens and, you know, that's it. It's like these things have identifiable things. Like, for example, eclampsia, that can be a cause of death, but it's somewhat gradual. Like, it starts as preeclampsia, and if it's recognized and treated, the person won't die. But if it's not, if it's sort of ignored, or, oftentimes women are told that their symptoms and their, you know, physical struggles are natural or normal, or, oh, pain, that's normal, when actually it could be a sign that your body is telling you that something is seriously wrong and you need to address it. Um, well, and of course, none of these CDC statistics, they are talking specifically about like physical illness and stuff like that. But yes, we know, I didn't even mention that the leading cause of death in pregnant women of any cause, like even if you factored in car accidents and stuff like that, but the leading cause of death in pregnant women is homicide. So you're more likely to die of being killed by your male partner than any other cause in pregnancy. But I think in this case, we're talking more about healthcare related issues, and like Figures Gates has likely more to do with the lack of postnatal care. And postnatal care, I mean, so much is about getting that baby out healthily, and postnatal care is really neglected for a lot of women. A lot of women give birth and they don't even know how to take care of themselves after. Like, no one is really looking out for them or educating them. There's so many follow-ups uh, in the short term with the baby's health, and, you know, childbirth, whether you have a C-section or a natural birth, and whether you tear or you don't tear, there's a lot going on with those tissues and a lot of healing that needs to happen. And it may not just be like this intuitive thing, like people just assume that women are going to know how to best treat their body in the aftermath of giving birth. So, and this is super interesting. 44% of Michigan maternal deaths are preventable. I'm assuming that might be where you're from. Um, and we're going to be talking specifically about New York City today. And what is absolutely wild, and I have no idea why this is, but we're going to look at this in the article, is in New York City, Black women are, okay, so nationwide, Black women are 3 times as likely as a white woman to die of a pregnancy related complication. In New York City, they are 8 to 12 times as likely to die. And the infant mortality is 3 times higher for Black babies. So, why is it so much higher in New York City? That is a really, really good question when you think of New York City being almost 100% Democrat, very liberal place, a place with a lot of social services, and also a place where we're in the Northeast. So you would think that there should be less racism than maybe you think stereotypically of the Deep South or something like that. So why is it so dramatic? It's like 4 times what it is throughout the country. So, according to the CDC, heart disease and stroke cause the most deaths overall. Obstetric emergencies cause the most deaths at the time of delivery. So that would be things like hemorrhage, and LavenderRose is says worldwide the leading cause of maternal death is severe bleeding, hemorrhage, and then infections, then high blood pressure, and then preeclampsia and eclampsia. Um, and so, yeah, at different stages, during the pregnancy, during the delivery, and after, are going to have different, most common maladies, I guess. In the week after delivery, severe bleeding, high blood pressure, and infection are most common. And then cardiomyopathy, weakened heart muscle, is the leading cause of death in the year following delivery. So that is really, really wild. And LavenderRose says Black women living in poverty have a lot of high blood pressure issues due to the stress of living in poverty and racism, and possibly diet, access to healthcare, high blood pressure. They call it the silent killer because, you may go through life with like high blood pressure and you just don't know because there are not really any symptoms to it. And so that's the kind of thing where a regular checkup, it will find that or screening for it. But if you aren't getting those regular checkups, you may not even know you have it. And it's not going to cause you issues necessarily in the short term, but in the long term, it can be a serious issue. So the CDC has made some recommendations of what we could do better with helping patients manage their chronic conditions, communicating with patients about warning signs for different illnesses. This is like if they're getting medical care at all, which maybe in a lot of the cases the issue is that they're not getting medical care at all. And using tools to flag warning signs early so women can receive timely treatment. Hospitals and health systems can standardize coordination of care and response to emergencies. And we're going to be talking about a death that occurred in a hospital today, and improving the delivery of quality prenatal and postpartum care, training providers, and, so there are a lot of recommendations of ways that these 2/3 of deaths are preventable, don't forget. So they don't have to happen. And we're also talking about in a lot of situations where the mother dies and the child lives. And that is really the most tragic situation because now a woman who could have raised her child and provided that child care is now gone. So states and communities can assess hospitals, which again, we're going to see that in the article today, and reviewing causes of each death so that they can be prevented in the future. I always think things like this, it's like the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board. When there's a plane crash, they don't just say, oh, whoops, that happened, right? Like they go in and they figure it out. And there's rarely ever two plane crashes that happen the same way. But do women die over and over again of the same issues? Yes, they do. Again, we're going to see that in the article coming up. And women need to know and be educated about the symptoms and complications that they might face. I think a lot of women don't want to know. Like, it's so scary, some of these things. And I read a book about a year ago that was like pretty much listed every single thing that can go wrong in pregnancy. And it's like really terrifying. And I don't know if you knew all of that stuff, if that would sway your decision whether to have a child or not. Some women just really, really want kids no matter the consequences or potential consequences. But it's so important to be aware anyway. And just a couple of notes on infant mortality. We're not going to be talking about that specifically, but just have a list here of the top causes. And these are often preventable too. So preterm birth and low birth weight, that's often related to prenatal care, birth defects also. So, or whether the pregnancy was planned or unplanned, or what kind of care the mother got leading up to giving birth. Let's see. LavenderRose says Obamacare was a big joke. It actually cut back access to quality healthcare under the guise of eliminating redundant care. Interesting. I know it definitely expanded care to certain people in certain areas, but I don't know. There were definitely a lot of unintended consequences to it for sure. Community gardens are being cut back or eliminated. Foreign companies and out-of-state companies are gobbling up real estate in urban cities right now. So that's another like positive thing that could have a positive impact on people's health. And, I think the main issue why maternal outcomes in New York City are so much worse is due to poverty. And this is like a representation of, you know, when we can't even fund a community garden, like, I don't know. Yeah. And this is a state by state representation of where infant mortality is the worst. So the darker the color, the worse the infant mortality is. So Vermont is crushing it with very, very few deaths, and the Deep South is the worst, which is not really super surprising. And that's all I've got for our little slideshow. So let's take a look at the article. I'm going to turn over to the other screen now so I can read to you. And the article is called "A Deadly Epidural Delivered by a Doctor with a History of Mistakes." Subtitle here: Inspectors found that an anesthesiologist at a Brooklyn hospital made numerous errors in administering epidurals. Some were life-threatening, one was fatal. And let's see. Give me 1 second. Got to rearrange my screen here so I can see your comments. So in this picture here, we have Juan Lopez, 26, posting for a portrait with his daughter, Chloe Lopez, too, in front of a mural of his partner, Sha-Asia Semple, in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn. I should also mention that this lady's name is Sha-Asia, and sometimes she used the last name Washington, which there is a Wikipedia article about her, which uses the name Washington. So that's what I used in the title of this video, but the article refers to her as Sha-Asia Semple. And this article is by Joseph Goldstein, who writes about health, and I'm not sure what else he writes, but he's a longtime journalist for the New York Times. Okay. And as always, like, feel free to chime in as I read. I do stop and make comments, and then I'll read your comments too. If there's anything, feel free to react. That's what the space is for. I mean, we might get into some things that are like pretty wild here, okay? So feel free to react and feel free to use the chat as you wish. Dr. Dmitry Shelchkov, an anesthesiologist at a public hospital in a predominantly Black neighborhood in Brooklyn, would later say that his job was straightforward with not a lot required. An anesthesiologist whose job is literally to keep people alive. His job didn't require a lot. Okay, sure. But when it came time to give an epidural to Sha-Asia Semple, a pregnant 26-year-old woman in labor at Woodhull Medical Center on July 3rd, 2020, Dr. Shelchkov botched the routine procedure. The catheter to deliver the anesthesia should have gone about 4 inches into her lower back. Instead, he kept inserting the line, threading it in and up more than 13 inches, a state medical review board later found. How do you make that mistake? Like, you know how much you put it in because it's a thread of a certain length. So there should be a guide or something of like, this is where you stop to keep threading this thing in for 13 inches. That's like the whole length of a person's back, which is insane. Um, yeah, wild. And Zay says, gosh, she was so young, 26, I know, little baby. Just, it is so tragic. Then Dr. Shelchkov administered a full dose of anesthesia without waiting to see how Ms. Semple responded to a small test dose, according to the state board. The anesthesia landed in her cerebrospinal fluid and circulated around her central nervous system. So, I guess my understanding, again, not a doctor, but I believe that epidural is supposed to be quite local to your lower back, pelvic area, and basically the point is so that you don't feel the pain of contractions in childbirth and things like that. It is a pretty routine thing. I think I wouldn't be surprised the majority of women get that or have, you know, that during, childbirth. My other understanding is that it's, like, paralyzing and you can't really move your lower body when you have that. But the point is, it's not supposed to go in your entire central nervous system or, like, impact your brain. He was old. He had been to answer Zay's question, how old was he? He had been a doctor for I actually looked him up. He'd been a doctor for, like, 30 years or something, 30 or 40 years, like, he had a, long career. Um, yeah, I think it's gonna be depressing, I agree, probably, also eye-opening. And, yes, other people have said this as well, that it's more like the M word than the, an accident or something. How could you be so negligent? So negligent. "I can't breathe," Miss Semple said as her breathing grew labored before stopping altogether. Another doctor rushed in to help. "I can't believe this is happening again," the doctor screamed at Dr. Shelchkov, according to a federal hospital inspection report. Oh my god. I can't believe this is happening again. If it ever happened once, what is that doctor still doing working there? That's what's wild, right? Her baby survived, but Ms. Semple did not. It was several weeks after George Floyd's murder had set off a national reckoning on race. So this is 2020. Don't forget, it's like middle of COVID lockdown. The everything was on fire. Trump was still president. We're all having an existential crisis. Um, and Ms. Semple's death sparked a demonstration outside the hospital and news coverage about how in New York City, Black women like Ms. Semple are 9 times more likely to die of pregnancy-related complications than white women, a much greater disparity than exists nationally. Again, we just talked about that a few minutes ago, but yeah, it's like, why New York City? It's gotta be poverty, And New York City is like New York City, a rich city. It's an East Coast city, but it's actually a place where there's a massive disparity in income. And that disparity is across racial lines. Many factors contribute to that disparity, but Dr. Shelchkov's career, he was stripped of his medical license in late 2021, which is also crazy, a year and a half after, he killed this woman essentially. He was still had a medical license for a year and a half after that. Um, my mom is a nurse, and she would always say, that doctors bury their mistakes, because obviously, like, everybody makes mistakes at work from time to time, right? But, like, doctors, there's not a lot of room for error, so they have to build in a lot of, checks and balances and things like that to, um, make sure that they don't kill people. Dr. Shelchkov's career brings one of the factors into focus: large gaps in the quality of medical care at hospitals across the city. So it's not just necessarily an issue of access to medical care in general, but an issue of access to quality medical care. Um, yeah, I bet this is true. It's almost impossible to get rid of an incompetent doctor working in an urban hospital because who is going to replace them, right? Rich people and poor people need to use the same hospital, but their priorities will change. Mhm. In New York City, you have a huge population of ultra rich people. So I don't know, I'm not an expert on this topic, but I would assume that there are certain places that like don't take insurance or don't take Medicaid and only cater to wealthy people, right? So there would be certain places where the top quality doctors are going to um they're going to congregate there. Like Taquito says, rich people will go to a clinic. So, and Zay says, I should check my blood pressure. Honestly, I never thought about it. Yeah, so that's a good reminder to everyone. Lavender Rose says middle class Black women also have high rates of high blood pressure. Everyone get your blood pressure checked. Sometimes you can even do it at like the pharmacy and stuff like that. So it's a good thing to do. Um, yeah, and I wouldn't doubt this either. Okay. Until now, the specific medical errors that caused Ms. Semple's death have not been publicly reported in detail, nor has it been reported that in the more than 2 years before her death, 6 other pregnant patients in labor at Woodhull suffered adverse outcomes related to administration of anesthesia, according to the hospital inspection report. So, in the 2 years before her death, 6 other pregnant women in labor had uh, anesthesia issues. Um, Ice Goddess has a blood pressure cuff at home. I have one at home. I don't use it that often, but when I get kind of worked up, sometimes it's worth seeing where you're at. Um, let's see. In almost all those cases, Dr. Shelchkov was apparently involved, according to the report, which did not name him but described errors attributed to him in other documents. So, in other words, in the 2 years before she was killed, he had accidents with 6 other patients. In some instances, he pushed the epidural needle or the catheter that fits through it too far, which resulted in the anesthesia mixing with cerebrospinal fluid rather than remaining in a separate space near nerve roots, according to the report and the State Medical Review Board's findings. Such mistakes, though rare, are usually caught quickly and corrected, but Dr. Shelchkov sometimes skipped a crucial safety measure, giving a small test dose and waiting to see the patient's reaction before administering the full dose of anesthesia, a state medical review board found. I actually had a similar experience to that. I was in the hospital for a testing for a condition that I had, and there was a medication that was supposed to treat that condition, and the doctor came in and they're supposed to do the same thing, a test dose, and instead they pushed the whole thing in just like an IV or whatever. And I had like a major reaction to it. And then I had to go into this like recovery area and get another medication to counteract it and stuff. So it's like, we put so much trust in these people to just like do their job, according to the regular things, giving a test dose and seeing the reaction. When you're giving a medication, like either an IV medication or this kind of epidural, the reaction is going to happen really, really quickly, like within under a minute, right? because it's circulating in your blood and everything. And the epidural should just be local, but you're gonna feel a feeling of, pain relief or paralysis or whatever it does, uh, pretty quickly. And there's no reason to skip that step besides, like, maybe saving a little bit of time. So it's wild, really, like, medical malpractice. And I don't think it's just cultural. Like, I appreciate that Black women have an extra layer of distrust, but let's, talk about the fact that all women's concerns are generally shrugged off, especially when we talk about gynecological stuff and in some cases obstetric too. I haven't had that personal experience, but I think a lot of us have had this experience with gynecologists just being like, "Oh, your pain is normal," and stuff like that. Just very, very shrugged off. So let's see. Despite the clear pattern, administrators and department heads at Woodhull did little to monitor him, federal hospital inspectors wrote in the report, which is in a database of federal hospital inspection reports created by the Association of Healthcare Journalists. The document paints a disturbing picture of dysfunction at Woodhull, part of the city's public hospital system, which serves many of New York's most vulnerable mothers. And it's like you're taking this population who probably had really poor, um, prenatal care, who probably don't have the best diet, who don't have the best education on this stuff, and then you're getting to the most crucial part of the pregnancy, which is the delivery, and they've all leading up to that, they've not been given a chance to have the best outcome, and then you're throwing them in one of these hospitals that are just totally substandard. Nearly 1,500 women give birth there each year at this Woodhull hospital. About 85% of them Black or Hispanic, under 10% are white. The majority of patients have Medicaid. And here's a picture of the place. It doesn't look particularly bad from the outside, but when rare complications from epidural anesthesia, which provides pain relief during childbirth, begin occurring unusually often at Woodhull, the cases oops, sorry. Okay. When rare complications from epidural anesthesia, which provides pain relief during childbirth, began occurring unusually often at Woodhull, the cases went unreported. Hmm. Not until a patient died did hospital administrators even notice a pattern. What? While medical mistakes can happen in any hospital, the case of Dr. Shelchkov was extreme, both in the sheer number of errors he made and in the fact that it took so long for someone to intervene. So that's another thing that these prior 6 women who were injured by this guy, they may not have felt empowered to file a medical malpractice suit against them or have access to the legal system or have the resources or know, what to do about that. So did they not even complain about it? I mean, definitely doesn't sound like any of them went the medical malpractice route, but like, did they even complain about it? Why there was no pattern identified? So, especially in the era of medical records, like you can have AI doing this, identifying um, patterns associated with a certain doctor. How is this doctor not getting written up for some of these mistakes? And what about his file? Like, there was nothing in his file that said like he's hurting these women. Just kind of mind-boggling. And then what incentive does he have to improve when it seems like there's no accountability at all for the mistakes that he's making? The federal hospital report does not refer to Dr. Shelchkov by name, instead calling him Staff A, but his identity is clear when Staff A's description is compared with other documents, including a subsequent ruling by the State Board for Professional Medical Conduct, which in 2021 found Dr. Shelchkov to have practiced medicine with negligence and incompetence. It is only as this issue occurred, Ms. Semple's death, that I became aware of the other incidents involving pregnant patients. The chief of the anesthesia service at Woodhull later told federal hospital inspectors. So essentially, that doctor's boss wasn't even aware of these other issues. How did this get so swept under the rug? It's really wild. Um, yeah, incompetence is definitely an understatement. In a phone interview with the New York Times, Dr. Shelchkov said that when something went wrong, the anesthesiologist always made an easy target. Oh my god. Like zero self-awareness, zero self-reflection. Like you literally killed her. Like, oh, I'm an easy target because I'm the anesthesiologist. You are the one who did it. Everyone wanted to present themselves as the hero and that it wasn't their fault, he said. It was literally your fault. He said that Ms. Semple's death and the trauma and exhaustion of working during the first wave of the coronavirus pandemic had left him feeling devastated. Well, at least he felt devastated, but did he feel devastated because he lost his career over this, or did he feel devastated because he killed a woman? And also, like, I guess I have empathy for healthcare workers during that, especially during that early period of COVID, but, like, even still now, it's pretty bad. My sister is a healthcare worker and, like, it's bad, you know? But I don't know, I'm not to, diminish this guy because I think he's awful, but there is something to healthcare workers being overwhelmed. Oftentimes, if they, raise an issue with the hospital administration, like, basically nothing happens. I don't think that's the case in this case, but it's certainly, look, we know there's so many stories about, like, nurses being overworked and working too many hours and too many days in a row and, having too many patients. Like, a nurse goes on her shift and she's got 15 patients or something. How are you expected to give care to 15 people in the course of 8 hours and chart everything and, the rest of it? There definitely is an issue with people being overworked during COVID and then still today. Um, People being underpaid. Again, I don't think that's the issue here. Hospital administration getting greedy because we know everything about healthcare in the US is for profit. Once again, I don't think any of those things are necessarily at play here, but those are systemic issues and they probably do lead women to getting worse care, and especially in these um, hospitals that are in poor neighborhoods and the majority of their patients are Black women or minorities. Lavender Rose, again, that's a capitalist profit motive. Yeah. They, capitalists, they want to suck every little extra ounce of value out of the life of everyone else, workers and consumers. If you think of the patients as consumers of this healthcare, they want to make the healthcare as low quality and they want to make the staff as underpaid and overworked as possible so they can suck out this little extra uh, bit. And they're already rich. May not be the case at this particular hospital, but that is a systemic problem for sure. Hi, Teal Woman. Hi, Teal Woman says, this is why women turn to natural medicine, which is also not safe. It's like varying degrees of safety, I guess I will still trust the FDA over like, some snake oil salesman. There are some values to non-Western medicine, I'm sure. A lot of it's placebo effect type stuff, which is a legitimate thing for real. Um, but yeah, where is our safe, good healthcare for women? Where is it? In a statement, the city's public hospital system noted that it had a range of programs aimed at reducing severe maternal morbidity and closing racial disparities. These include extensive emergency simulation programs to train labor and delivery staff, as well as bigger roles for doulas and midwives than exist in many private hospitals. The rate of cesarean deliveries at the city's public hospitals is lower than the statewide average, a promising indicator. So that is good. Woodhull has plans for a new birthing center, and according to documents submitted to federal hospital inspectors, the hospital has strengthened its review of serious mistakes and adverse outcomes. Mayor Eric Adams and the city council have rolled out several policies aimed at improving maternal health, particularly for Black women, in recent months. New York City does have a Black mayor, so I don't know if that could lead to some improvements in this. I do think situations when I don't have any statistics on this, but it's my understanding, I guess I could say, that doulas and midwives do improve outcomes for, do they reduce injuries and deaths and things like that? I would guess that they do. That'd be a good thing to get some statistics on. Look at this darling child. Each year in New York City, more than 20 women die of pregnancy-related causes, and about 3,000 women nearly die. That's kind of wild that there are that many emergencies that are so severe that they nearly die. In 2017 and 2018, the last years for which New York City has released data, most of the women who died were Black. Let's see, what's the demographics of New York City? So New York City, interesting. Okay. New York City is 44% white, 25% Black, 27% Hispanic of any race. So, pretty diverse. That's definitely more diverse than like the national average. But if only 25% are Black and the majority of the women who are dying are Black, then, there's something really out of whack there. Experts point to a range of factors to explain this, including a prevalence of underlying medical conditions, a lack of access to prenatal care, we talked about that, or good medical insurance, and racial biases. Some providers fail to take some patients' medical complaints seriously. Yep. We know that. Chloe, this is little Chloe. Her mother, Ms. Semple, died in childbirth at Woodhull, and that is what we're currently reading about. Yes, what Ice Goddess says, first world country, my ass. Yes. I know. It's really wild. The US, we spend way more than any other country per person on medical care, but it goes to very few people for very expensive procedures. And, we're ranked 40th or something in a lot of health metrics. I mean, some health metrics were ranked. We have the most STDs of any country, per person or whatever, of any developed country. We're the only country, I think the only other country is Serbia, where maternal mortality has gone up in the last 20 or 30 years or something like that. So every other country is doing it way better than us for way cheaper than us. Why? I really believe that we should have everyone that we should have like a single payer national universal healthcare, whatever you want to call it. It's insane. I've been on Medicaid in the past. I went through this illness where I was like too sick to work and I was poor. And I went on Medicaid and it was amazing because I live in a state where Medicaid is amazing. And pretty much every doctor took it and you could go anywhere and you didn't have to go to poor hospitals and stuff. But I have the luxury of living in a rich state that takes care of poor people. Connecticut is very, you know, Connecticut has a high income disparity too, but we're one of the wealthiest states, if not the wealthiest. And our system for welfare and social services and stuff like that is like unbelievably good. Like nobody falls through the cracks who doesn't, who can access stuff. Like obviously there are certain people who have trouble accessing things, but you go around Connecticut, there are really not like a lot of homeless people anywhere. People are housed, people are given medical care, and I think we really should judge our society on how not on the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezoses and how big their yachts are, but how we treat the poorest, most vulnerable, sickest, mentally ill, whatever amongst us. That's how we should judge, whether our society is doing well or not. Um And I basically like don't disagree with this because the idea was to expand healthcare to everyone, which, it kind of did, right? Which is good. Like everybody should have access to healthcare and got rid of pre-existing conditions and like there were some good aspects to it. But then the problem is, now it's just like a blank check almost to the health insurance industry, right? Because they have this like now they have guaranteed customers. And if anyone has like ever shopped for healthcare on the exchange or anything like that, just like every year they offer less and less. It costs more and more. The premiums are insane. The deductibles are insane. I When I got back into working in my career and everything, there was one year where I made $24,000 a year and my health insurance deductible was like very low. It was like a couple $100s. And then the next year I made $30,000. In other words, I made $6,000 more and my health insurance deductible went up to $6,000. They literally took every extra penny that I made. Like, where is the incentive to I mean, it's just the whole structure of the system is insane. Unless you're really, really poor in a good place, um, or really, really rich, it doesn't work well for like that people and who are in the middle. Yeah, Lavender Rose says no one can afford the premiums. The deductibles are through the roof. This was intentional. I don't know if it was intentional or it was unintentional, but it's where we're at and it's not good. And I mean, who is to blame? Like, yes, I voted for Bernie twice. I think he's like one of the only people who has any integrity at all, but they did fight it hard. I will give you that. I agree. They fought Medicare for all as hard as the Republicans fought anything. I mean, really, I think the blame ultimately comes down to Republicans who've just been resistant to like basically anything. And the reason it sucks so bad now is that a lot of the compromises that were made were because Republicans just would not give. They would not give. So we are where we are. Um okay. Racial disparities in maternal deaths are also linked to the fact that Black women are often more likely than white women to deliver at hospitals with lower quality of obstetric care, research suggests. In New York City, the differences in hospital quality may account for nearly half of the racial disparity in severe maternal morbidity rates, a 2016 study found. The poor quality of care at such hospitals can take many forms, ranging from lower performing doctors to understaffing, which forces patients in distress to wait longer. Or the hospitals may lack rigorous guidelines and protocols for responding to severe bleeding during childbirth. Hmm. Woodhull Medical Center is one of 11 public hospitals run by New York City. The crown jewel of the city's medical system is Bellevue Hospital, with Woodhull at the other end of the spectrum, a rust-colored behemoth at the edge of Bedford-Stuyvesant, a predominantly Black neighborhood in Brooklyn. It is known for the Keith Haring mural in the lobby and a mixed safety record. Safety data from 2014 to 2017 made public by USA Today shows that women delivering at Woodhull had serious emergencies such as severe bleeding, strokes, and anesthesia complications at 2.5 times the rate of hospitals statewide. Though that was lower than some other Brooklyn hospitals, the women who deliver at Woodhull have higher rates of conditions like hypertension and obesity and that raise the risk of complications, doctors noted. So again, some of this pre-existing conditions or lack of prenatal care is some of the issue, but then some of the issue is that just the administration sounds terrible. Like they don't even have what did it say? They don't have rigorous guidelines and protocols for responding to severe bleeding during childbirth. That's an administrative issue. That's not even a doctor issue or anything pre-existing with the patients. So here is Miss Semple on the right. She was excited about her pregnancy, and now she's dead. I know, it looks like we all, well, yes. Oh, man. I was actually just talking to somebody about that the other day that was like, yeah, I voted for Bernie over Hillary, even though she's a woman. I felt he was the better option, just way more liberal, you know? The thing in the US, we don't really have a liberal party. We have two right of center parties. They're both pro-capitalism, you know, you have the neoliberal Democrat Party and Republicans, which are just like abysmally bad. Totally write that off. So, I mean, it's true. It's really sad and really true. In an interview and in testimony to a state medical board, Dr. Shelchkov insisted that some of the errors attributed to him occurred during the pandemic's first wave when hospitals were overwhelmed and the standard of care dropped. But the records indicate that troubling scenes had begun cropping up before that. In August 2018, not long after he began working at Woodhull, Dr. Shelchkov placed an epidural for a 42-year-old woman who was 39 weeks pregnant, according to the Federal Hospital Inspection Report, shortly after her blood pressure dropped and she became unresponsive. Oh, God, that's so scary, isn't it? The obstetrician interviewed by hospital inspectors a few years later remembered that Dr. Shelchkov was just standing there. Oh my God, this guy's such a loser. He was probably making like what did the anesthesiologists, they make about like $300,000 a year or something too. I don't know there though, but to just stand around while your patient is like dying. The patient who later recovered was intubated and had an emergency C-section. So that's pretty darn serious. The interim chief of anesthesiology at the time concluded that Dr. Shelchkov had apparently given a full dose of anesthesia without an initial test dose and had placed the catheter incorrectly according to the federal report. So exactly what he did this over and over and over again. After that, the chief described having monitored him constantly until the summer of 2019 when a new doctor took over as head of the anesthesia service. The new doctor later told investigators that he had about any issues involving Dr. Shelchkov. So again, this is like a real administrative problem, oversight, and we know the administrators are getting paid more than anybody else. And they're not doing their job either. The city's public hospital system has long outsourced much of its physician staffing to private hospitals and medical schools. Dr. Shelchkov had technically been hired and employed by NYU Langone Medical Center, a top Manhattan hospital, though he did not work at any of its facilities, only Woodhull, according to an NYU Langone spokesman, Lisa Greiner. So that's kind of a strange setup there. In the interview with the Times, Dr. Shelchkov expressed pride that he had worked through the pandemic, sometimes clocking 85 hours a week at Woodhull. People needed my help, he said. It was like a war. I was intubating 20 patients a day, he said. It was pure horror, people screaming. I mean, I guess I have some empathy for that. Like, he still killed somebody, so I don't know how much empathy I have, but that was a really terrible situation. I mean, like that era of the pandemic or maybe slightly earlier, people were dying waiting in line outside of emergency rooms in New York City. They were literally dropping dead like flies. There were refrigerated trucks parked outside these hospitals because the bodies were piling up so quickly. So, given that this is a tragedy, he had a history of these same kinds of accidents. We wouldn't even be reading about this if she had survived, you know what I mean? Like, he'd still be probably making these same problems, like COVID or not, you know? Yeah, that's, doing a small dose and then adding slowly. They say that's the typical protocol, and he wasn't doing that. So, mm. Captain Meowdy says, "Oh, the hospital in my city is still in crisis beds and hallways." Yeah, I think it's gotten worse that this winter because you had the triple demic of the flu, RSV, and COVID. So, um, and nurses are super, super overworked. I've been to the ER when I've been, the hallway person. You're like in the bed in the hallway. It's happened to me a couple times. So there's definitely a systemic problem here. Not to excuse what this guy did, but he was only allowed to do that because there were systemic problems that that could have prevented this accident. Like there was just no oversight. The administration was really poor, and then you have this COVID crisis on top of it. It's sort of like the perfect storm of everything going wrong. Ultimately, I think he's responsible, but there's a lot else going on here too. Um, Dr. Shelchkov, 62, full medical career behind him, said the pandemic took a toll, affecting his focus and leaving him exhausted. A state medical review board said that was no excuse for what happened next. So here is dad. Mr. Lopez often shows Chloe pictures of her mother so she will know who she is. That's a sweet picture. Okay. Coming towards the end here. According to the federal report, Dr. Shelchkov was called in to give an epidural to a 31-year-old woman at 3 a.m. on May 22nd, 2020. So it's like a couple months before. "Give me air," she said. Before becoming unresponsive, she was intubated and her baby was delivered via C-section. The mother recovered. Again, that's gotta be like just so terrifying, feeling like you're suffocating. A state medical committee later concluded that the episode appeared to be another case of Dr. Shelchkov's placing the epidural catheter too deep, an error that might happen in 1 in 1,000 epidural attempts, according to an anesthesiologist the state hired as an expert. Anesthesiologists are usually quick to recognize such mistakes and correct them before administering a full dose of anesthesia, but Dr. Shelchkov didn't catch his errors in time. I'm really sorry to laugh, but this is hilarious. Okay. Yeah, so this was happening, like, over and over again, and I think that's really the point that, yeah, he was responsible for this case and the other cases, but it could have been caught if the administration was doing their job, which they weren't. Um And so this is a pretty rare error, putting the catheter in too deep. You would think it would be rare because it's a catheter. You know how long it is. You know how much is going in. Like, how can you feed something in 13 inches that's supposed to go in 4 inches? There should be, couldn't they even put like a little clip on it or something so then it just would stop at the skin? Like, how is there no safety mechanism or, like, safeguard for that? It's wild. In June 2020, a pregnant woman complained that Dr. Shelchkov took an hour to place the catheter for an epidural, that she was bleeding heavily from the attempts and unable to walk straight. In response, hospital administrators decided that going forward, Dr. Shelchkov should ask colleagues for help after 3 unsuccessful attempts, according to the federal report. What a clown. Oh my god, that's literally your job, dude. Dr. Shelchkov, in an interview, claimed the epidural catheter took 7 minutes to place, not an hour. In interviews, anesthesiologists noted that placing a catheter sometimes takes a few tries and that some patients experience sudden drops in blood pressure or other adverse reactions regardless of an anesthesiologist's skill or care. Yeah, you can have a sudden drop in blood pressure that, like, from any kind of needle insertion, that's like a vasovagal response or whatever, which may or may not be an emergency situation, but damn, okay. On July 2nd, 2020, Ms. Semple arrived at Woodhull a few days past her due date to give birth to her first baby, according to the report. Her partner had recently bought an engagement ring and planned to propose a few days after the birth. They had chosen a name for the baby, Chloe. The following night, Dr. Shelchkov placed an epidural catheter. 2 minutes later, Ms. Semple had no pulse. For a moment, okay, this part's gonna get kind of like, for anybody who's squeamish, just take care of yourselves. For a moment, Dr. Shelchkov stood seemingly frozen, according to statements later given by a doctor and nurse to federal inspectors. Then he tried to put Ms. Semple on a ventilator, but according to the State Medical Review Board, instead of placing the breathing tube down her trachea, he sent it down her esophagus, a mistake he later blamed on the fogged up goggles worn as a COVID-19 precaution. The ventilator pumped oxygen into her stomach, not her lungs. What a joker. Failed intubations are more common among pregnant patients, but they are usually discovered quickly. It was 29 minutes before the error was recognized and the breathing tube was finally inserted correctly. So I wonder if they had inserted it correctly. She was like getting no air for 29 minutes. Like, no shit, she died. Would that have made a difference? Would that have saved her life? Like, it might have, and she would be here today, and we wouldn't be talking about this. We'd be talking about something else. The following week, protesters gathered in front of Woodhull, many carrying signs demanding justice for Ms. Semple. In 2021, the state's Office of Professional Medical Conduct held a disciplinary hearing in which a lawyer for the Department of Health, Daniel Gwensberger, called Dr. Shelchkov a ticking time bomb. By the time his medical license was revoked in late 2021, Dr. Shelchkov said he had been disabled by a severe COVID infection, unable to work or afford to live here. Dr. Shelchkov moved back to Russia last year after 25 years of practicing medicine in the United States. I don't buy that. Unable to afford to live here. You've been working as an anesthesiologist for 25 years. Like, this guy didn't want to face a potential criminal lawsuit, right? Move back to Russia. Dr. Shelchkov said Ms. Semple's death was the only time someone in his care had died during his 4 decades of practicing medicine. I was just devastated, he said, and described feeling close to suicide. A baby grows up motherless, he said. So he does have some feeling of remorse about it, for sure. That baby is now 2. She loves gymnastics class and silly putty and slime. No, I don't want to cry about this. It's day 27 of my cycle. I'm like, I knew I was at risk, but I was just, yeah, okay. Recently, she asked her dad a question that knocked him silent. I can't read it. Where's my mommy? Her dad, Juan Lopez, remembered how excited Ms. Semple had been all throughout her pregnancy, how many times after her death he had shown his daughter maternity photos and the video of the gender reveal in which Ms. Semple let loose all those pink balloons. Who's that? Mr. Lopez would ask. Mommy, Chloe would answer. After a few moments, Mr. Lopez, 26, told Chloe that Mommy was in the sky watching over her. On the night of Chloe's birth, Mr. Lopez was in the room as Ms. Semple was dying. No one told him what was happening. I think they need to watch who they hire, Mr. Lopez said, holding Chloe in his arms. That is so sad. I agree. I'm glad he has stepped up for his child, which is actually what he should be doing, right? But he shouldn't have to do it alone. She should be here. Totally senseless mistake. And the fact that she was intubated into her stomach instead of into her lungs is like, oh my God. It's like so, huh. Oh, this is an interesting. We need to keep these men away from treating women. I wonder, yeah, if you look at the outcomes of women who have a male OBGYN versus a female OBGYN, I have no data on this forever. So I have no data I have no data on this at all. So I can't speak to, if there's any relationship between women having better outcomes who have a female OBGYN. But I've seen both in my life. I've had a male OBGYN and I've had many female ones, and I've had emergency exams from male gynecologists like many times. And I would say in my experience, like, females are much better because they're female, right? Like, because they're female, like, just because they're female, they're better at treating women. Let's see. How do I Okay. Hi. Hi, everybody. So, um, we need to put more money into training competent medical professionals in the US, especially medical professionals of color. Good point. I think, and also the administration, like there's no accountability for the fact that they aren't catching these mistakes and stuff. Who is watching the watchmen, you know? Virtual hug. We all need it after that article. I wonder about this, like, women or any minority doctor or probably any kind of professional, they do have to work harder, right? Like they're discriminated against, and therefore they have to work harder to get to the same place that someone who isn't discriminated against, white men, to get to the same place that they get to. So wouldn't they necessarily be better? Yeah, I would say I try to now, whenever possible, choose female doctors always for any specialty. And sometimes you have to look harder, go further, or whatever to find a female, but it's worth it. Hmm. There are male doctors who still don't think women feel pain as much as men do and don't believe women when they say they don't feel well. Well, that's a real universal problem. And I don't think that is, well, I would say I don't think it's race specific because pretty much all of us have experienced that. There still probably is a range and still a disparity, but I think we've all experienced that to some degree of having our problems shrugged off as normal, especially gynecological problems, which is not exactly what we talked about in the article, but definitely an issue. Yes, I've had a bad experience with a male physiotherapist. If I have to go again, I will request to be helped by a woman. Definitely agree. If physical therapy too, which is often like massage, you just don't know what is going through that man's head, right? You don't. Hate to be like, suggest that men are creepy, but we have a lot of evidence that a lot of men are creepy. Yes, this is exactly what I was saying. You need to be 10 times better to be considered half as good. For sure. Ooh. How am I supposed to trust a doctor if he probably watches porn before going to work, as many men do? Right? Kind of a systemic issue with men in general is just not seeing women as human, not seeing women as worthy of the same level of humanity that men are worthy of. And oh my gosh, that's wild. My aunt died at 36 years old, which is so young. She knew something was wrong and went to many different doctors. They treated it like woman problems was a kidney infection and it killed her. That's actually like my big like if I have a phobia or a fear or something, it's that I'm gonna miss something because I've been so brainwashed that the pain is normal for a woman, and even severe pain. And then you go to the hospital and they don't run the right tests or whatever. They just assume it's normal. I mean, it happens to women a lot, like with heart attacks. A woman having a heart attack will go to the hospital and they'll say, "Oh, it's just anxiety." It happens where they write women's pain off as normal. I've said this a lot, but women's pain, like a woman in pain is seen as a normal state for a woman. There's nothing to treat, there's nothing to do because a woman in pain is a normal woman. It's actually the woman who's not in pain who's the aberration, so they don't see anything to be done when a woman is in pain. Salad Caesar. Love me a good salad. I hate how body positivity is focused on beauty now. It used to be about medical neglect. If you're overweight, doctors won't take you seriously. That's a very good point, too. Also, if doctors perceive that you have a mental health issue, they will give you worse care. You will, even if you go for a physical pain or physical anything, like physical symptoms, if they perceive that you have depression or anxiety or something, you will get worse care for your physical problems. There was a woman who had chest pain. The doctor told her to lose weight. Turns out she had lung cancer, and the doctor neglected her. And they have so many tools at their disposal. They have so many tests they can run. There's no excuse for them to just write things off. They just don't. It's like a laziness. They don't want to be do the work or whatever. LavenderRose says only 5% of doctors are Black, 56% are white. Doctors are like, so why are you here? Yeah. Taquito says, I think it's worse for Black women. They think they can tolerate even more pain. Yeah, again, it's just seen as normal. It's seen as a normal state, and it's like your burden to bear, right? Like you were born a woman or you were born a Black woman, and so this is your burden to bear. That's it. Like there's nothing to fix there. At my old job, an engineer had the same thing, chest pain, and they called an ambulance for him. Chest pain is a medical emergency. So that would be the correct thing to do. My arm has fallen off. Should have lost that weight. Yeah. It's hard to find a female gynecologist. Or probably any specialty, right? So if only 33% of doctors are women, you do probably have to go out of your way. And then for a lot of people that don't have the resources or they're limited by what doctors are in their insurance network or what doctors take Medicaid or things like that, you might get who you get and you don't get upset. But if you get Dr. Shelchkov, then that might be the end of your life. And that's by no fault of your own or nothing you did wrong. S. Women being told that extreme pain during menstruation is normal. It's not normal. Agreed. Nobody should be passing out or vomiting from period cramps. I agree with that as well. And yet many of us do deal with that. I have mentioned that I have this condition where I faint. I was born with it. I have different things that trigger it. It's the same thing as people who faint at the sight of blood or people who faint when they get blood drawn or an injection or something like that. It's the exact same thing. It just happens to me a lot more than a normal person. In a typical month, it's 2 or 3 times that I faint. And but it always happens, like, the day before my period, like, always like clockwork. It's like I'll faint, like, that night, and then the night before, and then the next day I wake up and I got my period. And I've talked to so many, like, gynecologists about that, and they're just like, I don't know, just it's probably fine." Like, that's their solution is like, "I don't know, probably fine." Like, I've been to, cardiologists and stuff to get it, like, make sure I don't have, like, a hole in my heart or something, and I'm good on that front, but it's like, the fact that they're like, "Well, there's, like, nothing you can do for it." What's happening every single freaking time I get my period, and other women say they, like, pass out, throw up, whatever, it's the same thing, and, like, why do we have to live with that? No one has come up with a solution for that? We know how to, like, cure baldness and stuff, like, give me a break. So many issues, so many things that could be improved. Yeah, it's definitely money focused and not human focused. I mean, it very, 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 very much so. The other thing, like I mentioned earlier, that I was on Medicaid for a time because I couldn't work due to being sick, and Medicaid is so much better administrated. Again, at least in my state, than, private insurance. Like, it's so streamlined. All of their procedures for getting things approved, and, it is so much less, like, bureaucratic and so much, like, less, like, administrative noise than private health insurance. And when I started making a little bit over, the poverty line or whatever, and I went back into private insurance and I was like, "No, Medicaid is so good." Um, because it's not money focused. It's like no one is profiting off of it. That's what makes it so good. Again, at least where I live, which is a rich state, there's a huge chunk of this country who don't even have access to Medicaid at all because Republicans run their states, and they've just decided that's how it's gonna be. So, there's no collective push for Medicare for all anymore now that the youth is making up new identities every day to LARP, instead of fighting for Bernie. I know. Imagine if we could, like, I think that young people, like, maybe don't care about this stuff because when you're young, typically you don't have a lot of health issues. So, it's not gonna you don't really care. You're like, "I'm fine, I'm invincible, like, I'm gonna live forever." It's amazing how fast the youth movement towards democratic socialism was co-opted for the gender cult. Ugh, yes. Yeah. And now it's like a prerequisite for being involved in any, like, organization or anything, especially for young people, that you have to accept that ideology, and if you don't, then, like, you can't even participate. Even though it is gender ideology that's leading even young people to be less accepting of LGB people, which is, like, really depressing. Yes, so true, so true. How the heck did we get, like, Biden? You know what I mean? Oh, and compare Biden to Trump, like, there's no comparison, whatever, but compare Biden to Bernie, forget it. I'm glad that we're all on the same page with that. Oh, this is a very good idea. This is like a practical good idea. They should make biology class more female focused, not just mitochondria or yeah. mitosis and all those kind of obscure things that you could just Google them nowadays anyways, and kids do, right? Like, they don't remember any of this stuff. They don't retain it, but we're not taught, at least in public school. I went to public school, like, we're not taught to take care of our bodies. Like, they don't teach nutrition, they don't teach basic women's health, they don't teach us to how to recognize illnesses. They don't teach us that you need to get your blood pressure taken, once or twice a year to make sure that you're healthy, you know. Mm, yes. I know. I actually talk about this somewhat often, but I think FDR was by far the best president we've ever had. I know Teddy Roosevelt too is problematic in ways, so don't come for me, but he also did a lot of trust busting, and, we are really in the same situation right now that we were in the late 1800s, of having these just ultra wealthy robber baron type capitalists, like, controlling our society and controlling our government and deciding whether we go to war, and, like, just all this crazy, we've actually been there before, and um we were able to stop that. And, like, the marginal tax rate used to be 90%. So if you were super, super rich, like, the top amount of money you made would be taxed 90%. Now those people don't get taxed at all. And the problem is we need that money to make our society good. We cannot function well without it. And instead, now you have, like, Jeff Bezos and people like that just hiding all their money offshore, not paying any taxes, doing all this, like, very creative accounting. I pay taxes. I pay more taxes than Donald Trump, you know? He's got his own airplane. I live with my parents, so, you know, it's gotta make you angry and get riled up a little bit, you know? Mm. Yes, yes. The US was so much more radical in 1920 than it was in 2020. Only 100 years of compromises to destroy the people's demands for socialism. We almost had universal health care. Almost. We're lucky we have Social Security. We're lucky we have a 5-day work week, which, by the way, used to be a 7-day work week. People had to fight. Working class people had to fight for that stuff. Women had to fight for the right to vote. Now women fight for the right to have men in their bathroom. Like, it does make you kind of angry that where is the left? Where is the passion to improve our lives? And by extension, I don't get it. I don't get, like, the complacency. I know. Trump paying $700 in taxes is like, what? People should be so mad about that. People are just like, back to now we have the internet, the great pacifier of to calm the masses, the bread and circus, so they can just steal our society out from under us while we're all distracted. It's kind of sick. Hey, Henna. Rar. Yes, I agree with this. The muckraker novels of the 1920s are so important now. Yes. So, anything else you all want to talk about? I think the article did a good job of highlighting that this is a systemic problem, that it's definitely a top-down problem, that there are potential solutions for it. Um, Maybe the doctor doesn't bear full responsibility for killing this woman. It could have been prevented, but, like, somebody's gotta take accountability for it. He definitely didn't have to. Um, and that's a bummer. And then again, because it's, like, poor people who and Black people who are at the receiving end of this injustice, that, um, they may not know how to go about receiving justice for themselves because they don't have access to, like, lawyers and stuff like that. So, I think the end of the article was kind of, like, poignant, how the dad said, "I think they need to watch who they hire." Like, what a kind of a sad way to end that, you know? It just feels like, oh, you're not gonna get any accountability for the fact that your girlfriend died, you know? Just like just that's life and move on. I feel like that's kinda what they expect. People just be like, "Yep, well, it happens. That's our plight," you know? Yeah, civilian oversight panels. And definitely, one thing I was thinking about this is, um, journalism is really important for things like this because the news editors, they make the news, they decide what is newsworthy, and some editor decided that this woman's story was newsworthy, and that's really important for raising awareness. Look at we just 20 of us just spent the last hour and a half talking about this woman's story, and no doubt many people read this article and, had thoughts about it and maybe had discussions about it and stuff. So, journalists doing their job of highlighting these stories really, really, really important. Zay has a suggestion. Could you do a radical feminist perspective on celebs? Do you mean like on celebrity as a thing? Um, because I have some thoughts. Well, like I would love to hear your thoughts, but like, um, do you mean like the idea of celebrity or like specific celebrity? I do like talk about celebrities pretty often because I think they're a good, you know, culturally we're kind of all aware of these things. So they're good, like, okay, celebrity culture. Interesting. Do you mean like how people worship celebrities and stuff like that? Or um yeah, elaborate a little bit more. um no, I often use celebrities to illustrate larger points about radical feminism. It's almost like an applied radical feminism rather than like the pure theory of it, applying it to things that we are witnessing in the news or in our day-to-day lives or whatever, rather than taking just the theory. So something like I made the Miley Cyrus video. So, the idea is that sexualization, self-sexualization are harmful to women. Well, you can talk about that in a vacuum, but if you have an example that people are familiar with and can grab onto and gravitate towards, then I think it's very helpful to illustrate that kind of stuff. Yeah. It seems like a lot of you have opinions about celebrities. Captain Meowdy says celebs all have to drink the Kool-Aid. They have to sell their soul, right? Um, Ice Goddess says, "All I see with female celebrities nowadays is the women look like their dress is they covered themselves in glue and fell in glitter." Hmm. Oh, that would be a great topic. I feel like I'm gonna write that down. Just put it in my to-do list over here. I have this master document of like literally hundreds of ideas that I'm sure I will never get to. I had an older document, and then when I like left YouTube for a little while, I deleted everything. I threw out all my stuff. I was like, I'm not talking about feminism anymore. Now I have a new document. The treatment of Britney Spears. Okay. Thanks for that suggestion. Objectification, sexualization, materialism, those types of topics. I mean, my favorite topic under the umbrella of radical feminism are those things. I really love talking about the beauty industry. Is it the most, someone said in my comments, "Oh, this is so trivial. Why would you even waste time talking about this?" It's like, yeah, I get it. There's like women who are like, like female genital mutilation and stuff. Is like makeup as big of an issue as that? Well, in a sense, in the West at least, I do think it is. I think it is a big issue because I think it's the number one way that we are persuaded to believe that we are lesser. And that Sheila Jeffries quote that makeup is to the West what the veil is to the Middle East is just like blew my mind. Like that's just such an amazing concept that the point is that men can just go out into public as they are and there's no dispute that they belong there. But in order for a woman to go out in public, she has to wear a mask. She's like more or less required to wear a mask. And whether it's a veil, burqa, niqab, or it's a full face of makeup that a man never wears or virtually never wears, because I know people will be like, "Oh, men wear makeup on TV and stuff." But even that, if you look at the way men's makeup is coded on TV versus the way women's makeup is coded on TV, it's totally, totally different. But men just get to exist. That's my point, is men just get to exist. Their humanity is unquestioned. And that's not the case for women, you know? And so I don't think it's a trivial issue like at all. And it happens to be my favorite issue to talk about. And it's also my favorite thing to tell women to do because it's like, oh, you want to do some feminist activism, you want to take some feminist action, show up in public in your bare face. It will cost you nothing. It will take no time whatsoever. And you are automatically a role model for every other girl or woman who feels like she doesn't want to make up her face, but feels like she has to because every single other woman does it. Anyways, get off my soapbox, Reminds me of what a Black woman once said about a woman's desire to be desired. They add something on their face because they want to be loved by many. You have to start believing that your value is not in your appearance. Ultimately, that's what, That's what I want women to take away from those conversations. It's not to feel like, no one should feel like gate kept out of feminism or this community or anything because they wear makeup. Like that's not what it's about at all. And it's not supposed to be like, "Oh, you're not good enough. You're not strict enough," or something. It's more of like, I want you to see your value and every other woman's value. I thought of something today. Would you tell a barefaced woman that she needs to wear makeup? Would you tell a barefaced woman that she should wear makeup? That she needs it? No, you wouldn't. No one here would tell a barefaced woman, "You need to wear makeup." But why don't we talk to ourselves that way? Why don't we say to ourselves, "You don't need it. You do not need it." Sometimes you see like a beautiful woman who's barefaced or whatever, and you're like, "Oh, she doesn't need makeup." It's like, well, no one does. No one does. No one needs it. And that's what I want women to take away. It's about self-love. Radical self-love. I want you to love yourselves and feel entitled. It actually, in a sense, like, um yes. There might actually be some of those out there, though. It ties back to this article in a sense today of, like, demanding and feeling like we're entitled. And that comes, feeling like you're entitled and feeling like you have the right to demand to be treated like a human. It all has the same root. It all has the same root. And the root is being able to radically self-love in a society that tells you your position or your place is as an object and you are not a human, you are subhuman. So how do you get beyond that and tell yourself, actually, I'm a human, I'm entitled to occupy space, I'm entitled to good health care, I'm entitled to, you know, whatever, I'm entitled to anything that a man is entitled to. Um, and you have to believe that. And I think that wearing makeup, honestly, it's like a habitual thing where even subconsciously you're telling yourself, I I don't deserve to be in public without this on my face. Even if you are um not thinking that consciously, doing that action over and over again every day for minutes, some people it's hours, time adds up, right? It's reinforcing that idea. I don't deserve to be in public without, this mask on my face. I don't deserve it. I'm not good enough. I am not as good as a man who deserves it. Men deserve it. I don't deserve it because I was born with a vagina. You know? This is a hard one. It's kind of hard, because if I say, "Oh, well, you don't have to work at a job that degrades you," which is like what some job dress codes do to women, then people will say, "Well, you're privileged for saying that." But I really, I wish that is the world that women don't have to work in degrading environments. I certainly have like I said that on our stream the other day. Said that on the stream the other day that I would never work a job again where I had to wear uncomfortable footwear because I have chronic foot problems and I've had pain 24/7 in my left foot for 4 years, and I've been to podiatrists and I've been to physical therapy for it, and I cannot get rid of this pain in my foot, and I really don't wanna have surgery, and I don't even know if surgery would do anything. But, I don't know if that stems back to years of wearing high heels, like, I don't know. Just like it's I'm reading your comments, like, it's hard to, like, have a train of thought, and then I'm, like, reading what you're writing at the same time. When a girl or woman does have a makeup-free day and people ask her if she's sick or she'll go right back to wearing makeup. Yeah. And now it's not just makeup, right? It's plastic surgery too. And that is becoming just so insanely common and prevalent. And the rise of all these procedures are so crazy. Um and injectables, like injectables drive me nuts. Like, Botox is I'm gonna stop at 3, but also I think that King Critical is streaming at 3, so I don't want to step on his toes. He usually streams at 3 on Fridays, and by the way, if you ever wanna find me outside of this channel, I'm, like, always in his chat. Um, a benevolent male. Yeah, so he's streaming at 3, so I'll be done by then. Um, so I don't know what we're just saying. Oh, yes, injectables. Like, Botox is literally one of the most toxic substances to human beings, and people inject it into their face. That's just so like, why? Because you have a wrinkle? Wrinkles are like a natural process of aging. It's so insane. Also, can we talk about how, like, we do all this stuff to impress men? We do it to impress men. Men are, like, not worth it. They're not worth impressing. They're not worth, like, ruining your health over. Please, come on, people. Ugh. Um, no, I listened to someone sent me, Sekhmet She-Owl, and it was she was talking about Black femininity because I'm gonna do a stream about Black femininity coming up, and, um and I listened to the whole thing. It was like an hour and a half long, but something that she said, and I actually saved the quote, and I thought about putting it in my community, and maybe I still will, but she said, let me see if I can find it, because it was just such a beautiful quote, and the way she said it was just, like, unreal. I was like, "Damn, I wish I came up with that." Let me make sure. Okay. Let me see if I saved it. Otherwise, I'll paraphrase it. Oh, yeah. Here we go. Listen to this quote and just get ready to have your mind blown. And then that's what I'm going to leave you with. Okay. Let me remind you again that the most pornified, feminine, conventionally effable women on this earth still get raped. They still get abused. They still get killed by men. Being feminine and effable and attractive doesn't save you. It just doesn't. Megan the Stallion got shot by a man for no reason. Rihanna got punched in the face several times by her ex-boyfriend. They couldn't be more feminine if they tried. And thousands, if not millions, of people think that they're beautiful and effable and whatever, but so what? So what? They still experienced male violence and they could again because that's female reality, no matter what race you are, no matter how physically attractive you are, no matter who you are. And I just thought that quote was amazing. Um, yeah, I don't think I've ever seen her videoed before. So I'm definitely going to have to listen to more from her because I thought everything she said was just so right on. It's like we do all this stuff to impress men who hate us. Stop putting the effort in. They are not worth it. Um, and we're talking about your time and your money. Spend your time and your money and your effort and your energy on other things. There are other things that will, you know, bolster your humanity or your love of yourself or whatever. So, That's what I'm going to leave you with. I know that's got way off topic from our topic today, but it was a real sad, depressing topic. So, whatever. And I will be back again next Friday. Next Friday, I want to talk about another depressing topic. I guess that's what we're doing on the Friday streams, at least right now. We'll get into some happy topics at some point, but this was a suggestion from a viewer to talk about how Black women experience domestic violence at higher rates than any other race, I guess. I don't have an article for it though. So if that's a topic that you're interested in and you know anything about or whatever, feel free to reach out to me because I want to talk about that topic, but I don't have a resource for it yet. I will obviously go look for one myself, but if you know of anything, I mean, that would be a great help. Also, I have no clue what I'm doing for next week's video. I was slightly considering taking the week off because I have literally been spending 40 hours a week on YouTube, which is just like nuts. And I actually need to do work my day job because I have deadlines and stuff coming up. But I want to try to do something this week. I'm just not sure what it's going to be. I wanted to do like a winter wellness for women going their own way and just do like a nice little positive, cozy video about how to care for yourself. That isn't like so much of the self-care videos on YouTube are all my face routine and stuff or which products to use. And so I kind of want to do like the anti that of just talking about nourishing yourself, moving, resting, those kinds of like little cozy type things. And yeah, thank you. Thank you, sisters, for joining the chat. All of you really, really appreciate it. I think LavenderRose gets the MVP for comments today. I feel like every stream, it's somebody, somebody different. Like, I wouldn't say does the bulk of the work, but like stands out as having really, really good comments. So thank you. Everybody can clap in the chat for LavenderRose. Good job. Really appreciated everything that you brought to the conversation today and everyone. And if there's any lurkers out there who want to just say hi on your way out, it's a good place to do so. And everyone else can say your goodbyes. And yeah, just thank you again for joining me for another Friday stream. I hope everybody learned something. And yeah, thanks. I guess I'll end it here. And again, I'll be over on King Critical's channel in his chat. I don't know what he's talking about, but he usually does these like reactions to gender critical or reactions to TRAs and stuff like that. So if you're into the gender critical thing, I do recommend you join us. So take care and I'll catch up with you next week. Bye.